subtracting doubles all me stuff. Do your homework ever with you?
Well, you guys just got to hear the cutest little 2-year-old help me make part of my video. In case you didn't notice, we are doing Chapter 5, Lesson 10, which is subtracting decimals, and our objective is to subtract decimals. Before we get started with our lesson, we need to understand one very important vocabulary word, and that is inverse operations. An inverse operation is an operation that can undo each other. So, addition and subtraction are inverse operations. For example, if we have 10 minus 6, we get 4. To undo that as an inverse operation, I could do 4 plus 6 would equal 10. So addition and subtraction are inverse operations that can undo each other. Before we start doing some guided practice examples of subtracting decimals, we need to write down the steps to subtract decimals in our notes. The first step is to line up the decimals. Second step, add a 0 to make the decimals the same length, or to hold the place value. The third step is to drop the decimal point in your answer. This is a very important step. If you do not put your decimal point in your answer, it is wrong. The fourth step is to subtract like normal, and the last step, add the difference and one of the addends to check your work. Your answer should be the other addend. This is what is called the inverse operation, using your answer and one of your addends to check your work. The first example we are going to look at is 15 and 42 hundredths minus 3 and 6 tenths. The first step we have to do is rewrite the problem and line up the decimals. The next step would be to add zeros to hold your place value. So I'm going to put a 0 in my hundredths place value and a 0 in my tens place value. The next step is to bring your decimal point down in your answer so you don't forget to put it there at the end. And then we will subtract like normal. When we subtract like normal, we are going to start at our farthest place value over to the right. So that's the hundredths place value. If we subtract 2 minus 0, we get 2. And then we go to the tenths place value. If we look at it, we know we cannot subtract 6 from 4 because 6 is bigger than 4. So we have to borrow from our ones place value, which will turn our 5 into a 4 and our 4 into a 14. If we do 14 minus 6, we get 8. 4 minus 3 would be 1. And 1 minus 0 would be 1. So our answer to 15 and 42 hundredths minus 3 and 6 tenths is 11 and 82 hundredths. In order to check our work, we could do the inverse operation. We can take 11 and 82 hundredths and add it to 3 and 6 tenths. When we do that, we still line up our decimals just like in subtraction because our decimal point has to go in the same place value. And then I'm going to add my zeros, bring down my decimal point to my answer. 2 plus 0 is 2. 8 plus 6 would be 14. Bring my 1 over. 3 plus 2 is 5. And 1 plus 0 is 1. So that is an inverse operation, and we checked our work, so we got the answer right. Okay, let's look at some guided practice problems. For our first problem, we have 42 and 28 hundredths minus 1 and 52 hundredths. So I'm going to line up my decimals and add my 0 to hold my place value. When I subtract, I'm going to start at my furthest place value to the right. So 8 minus 2 would be 6. We cannot subtract 2 from 5. So we have to borrow from our 2 and turn that into a 1. Bring that over, which turns that into a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. Oops, I forgot to put my decimal point. Make sure you do that first. Then 1 minus 1 is 0, and 4 minus 0 is 0. So my answer is 40 and 76 hundredths. To check that, I would do 40 and 76 hundredths plus 1 and 52. 2 hundredths. 6 plus 2 is 8. 7 plus 5 is 12. 1 plus 1 is 2. And 4 plus 0 is 4. And my decimal point. So I have 42 and 28 hundredths, which is my inverse operation. For our next problem, we are going to look at 8 minus 5 and 78 hundredths. When we look at our whole number, we know that there is a decimal point right after the whole number, even if it's not written there. And then I'm going to put 5 and 78 hundredths underneath. This is where adding zeros to your problem is very important because we know we can't subtract a number from a number that doesn't exist. So I'm going to add zeros, and then I'm going to have to borrow. So we know that 0 is, we can't take 8 away from 0. So we're going to have to go over and borrow. Okay, so when we look at this problem, we look at the 0 above the 8. We know we can't borrow from the 0 next to it, so we have to go all the way over to our 8 in the 1's place value. Sorry, forgot to switch to pencil. When I borrow from my 8, I'm going to turn that into a 7, which turns this 0 into a 10. But I still cannot subtract 0 from 8, so I'm going to turn this into a 9 and bring a 1 over to turn that into 10. So 10 minus 8 is 2, 9 minus 7 is 2, and 7 minus 5 is 2. So if I add my answer and my bottom addend, I will get 8 as my whole number. Ugly sweaters tomorrow. Okay, go ahead and do these independent practice problems. If you're able to catch the random words that have nothing to do with math, go ahead and write them on the top of your homework, and maybe your teacher will give you a treat or a prize.